Cloud. Oh, and it just said recording in progress. So I think that's
we heard that.
Thank you, Sydney. You taught us well.
Okay. I'm going to get us started here today. I'm Jason Brock. I'm not Sydney Bell, as most of you have already figured out. But Tim and I will be co-hosting, and we're going to give you some more information as we go along. So first of all, I'm going to give you a welcome on behalf of the coordinating committee. And so my name is Jason Brock. I'm in Peterborough. I'm with the coordinating committee. I'm one of several active representatives from the coordinating committee. I'll let you know a little bit about what the coordinating committee does. For those of you who may not know, the coordinating committee provides collaborative leadership, strategic guidance for all of the network's projects across the province. So there's 175 projects altogether. Part of our function is to plan, review, and support initiatives that are advance the network goals. So that's knowledge exchange, learning opportunities, and general community building, and all those across all those projects. And so the coordinating committee has 5 zones based according to geography. So there's representatives, including myself, from each one of those zones, as well as Indigenous representation, and representatives from the funding agency, so Public Health Agency of Canada, and the sponsoring agency, so that's communal well-being and mental health. And so before we get too far in, I'll give you a little bit of a breakdown as to kind of the format for today and what we're going to be working through. I'm going to hand things over to Blanca shortly to do our land acknowledgement, and then Tim's going to introduce our speaker. And we're very excited about the topic today and our speaker. And at the end, there'll be some opportunity for questions. This is part of the network's ongoing commitment for providing learning opportunities. So if you like what you see, or you have feedback at all, my understanding is in the coming days, there will be some opportunities for feedback, and we encourage you to, as always, provide some feedback on that. Okay, I'm going to turn things over to Blanca, who's going to get us started with our land acknowledgement today.
Thank you, Jason, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'd like to start us with before we begin with our land acknowledgement. We recognize that our collective work and the work of our funded groups takes place on traditional Indigenous lands across Ontario and across Canada. We also wish to acknowledge that our regional office for the Public Health Agency of Canada, where I'm coming from today, is located on the traditional Indigenous land of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. The lands in this land is part of the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, an agreement between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. This land is also covered by the Upper Canada's Treaty. Today, Toronto is still home to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and many peoples from all around the world. And we are grateful to have the opportunity to meet and work on this land. Miigwech.
I'm just going to jump in there quickly, Tim, before I take it away. Just a little housekeeping. Again, we will have opportunities for question and answer at the end of the presentation. So having said that, if you want to put yourself on mute, that'll just kind of cut out some of the background noise, and we can give our speaker center stage. That would be great. And again, if you would like to start putting where you're from in the chat, it's always nice to hear where people are coming from. And I will be monitoring the chat today, and we'll have some questions at the end. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Jason, and thanks, Blanca, as always, for your support in getting the ball rolling on doing something sort of for Father's Day, but also just for recognizing the work that we do with fathers and with having either fathers or father figures in the lives of children. We've, over many years, seen the benefits of that. And in fact, FAC even sponsored a study from the University of Guelph that highlighted the fact that a child with an involved father or father figure had many improved health outcomes in terms of both higher education, more stable relationships. Basically, all the outcomes were good. So we're happy to celebrate having fathers or father figures involved in the lives of children. So I have the privilege of welcoming Warren. Warren Kapashesit, I think I got it right that time, is an Indigenous Cree man from Moose Cree First Nation. He's educated in social work, and Warren has been helping in the field for 17 years. He's a program manager for child and youth Milopemahtesewin services, which again, he'll probably correct me on that one, but I did my best. And they provide a wide range of wellness and supportive services to Indigenous children, youth, and their families. Warren's previous work in program management, program development, therapeutic counseling, child welfare, and crisis work contributes to every project that he's involved with. He is a proud Cree man who lives with his wife and his 7-year-old daughter in the small town of Moose Factory, Ontario. And he's here today to give us a presentation on the Natural Helpers Program and culturally meaningful approaches to father engagement. So again, thank you so much for joining, Warren, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tim, Jason, and Blanca. Thank you for the invite. I am quite honored, quite excited to share. I'm always excited to share some of the work that I have been working on, or some of the things that I've been working on up here in our little pocket in the northern Ontario. So yeah, my name is Warren Kapashesit, and Tim, I gotta say, 90% of the time when people try to say my last name, they swear, and so it's all good. And then yeah, you did really good on Milopemahtesewin, so it's Child and Youth Milopemahtesewin Services, and again, you did really good on that, so thank you. So yeah, today, I'm coming to you today, and I bring with me about 18 years of experience working with Indigenous people. I have a social work background, as mentioned, and a lot of recent experiences and recent projects that have informed what I've been speaking about, I think, for the last 2 or 3 years. It's just been exciting work to me, and I'm always happy to share more about that, about what we're doing up here. So for today, I'll be sharing more about who I am, what I've done or have been a part of recently, and provide some considerations and suggestions on working with Indigenous fathers and then fathers in general. I know Father's Day has passed, and we had tried to work out a schedule, I think, to go before Father's Day, but we're not too far behind. It's we're still pretty well on track there. So that's what brought me here to you today, and thank you for joining. So let's get into it. So to start off, I am a father. I'm a father to this little bold and beautiful girl. She's well, in this picture actually, she's about 3 here. It's one of my favorite pictures of us. She's about 3 here. She's currently 7, and 7 is a fun age. Her personality is shining through. We're seeing different traits come from me, come from my wife Nadia. I love every minute of it. And well, maybe not every minute of it, because sometimes dealing with a toddler is tough. And it's something that we continue to learn and how to raise. And I think that's just the nature of fatherhood. That's the nature of parenthood, is that you continuously keep learning as you grow as an individual and as a parent. And for me as a father, so far it's been a great, really amazing journey. So we are an Indigenous family. We do live in a small community in Northern Ontario. And as parents, we've really aimed to do well for our little girl. Our goal is to take care of all of her little well-being as best as we can. And we learn as we go. And I think that's every parent's story. So our goal is to take care of her physical. We go about it in holistic. So that's physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And in a lot of ways, she is showing how to do it. Because like I said, we're learning things. We haven't done these things as kids. And that's, I think, a part of the shift of many Indigenous families out there. Parents, grandparents, and other family members, we're all learning or relearning Indigenous ways of being. And in these pictures here, you can see like it's a rite of passage for our girl. It's called a walking out ceremony for those who aren't familiar. And like many families in recent years, like we follow this tradition where we do not let our babies touch the ground until about 1 year old. And usually it's around the time where they're walking or they're near walking. And so in this ceremony, you can see that we've prepared different pieces here, like some like for the ground, for example, like we prepared the boughs. I went to go collect some boughs with, I think it was my brother who helped me collect these, and then we placed these on the ground with her. We prepare, like we sew and put together the dress, and we put together the moccasins. So we're involving me as a father, Nadia as a mother, and then we have my mom back there. And I think this is my dad right here. And in this tent frame, there's about 8, 10 other people, and each of them had played a role in preparing this for the ceremony. So it's all like a big family, a big friend role in preparing, and that's really symbolic of when you take care of a little one like this. So it's essentially like when you participate in a walking out ceremony, you are making a commitment to that child that you're going to take care of her as her journey continues. And we went through the walking out ceremony. She did amazing here. I prepared that little axe and the little wood bundle, and then we sat here. So this sweater here is from what actually my late grandfather's. So these are kind of different ways, different pieces that we include as part of our history and then as part of our current too. And she's our future, essentially. So this is really just the story that I wanted to share as an example of like where Indigenous people are at in the culture. And for her, it's becoming more and more often like where many children are now starting from in their journeys. So that's kind of more personal information of like where I'm coming from as a father, as someone who's an Indigenous person who's learning and like relearning old ways. I'm still on this journey to reconnect with my culture. And I continue to try to strive. And I think in a lot of ways, she's motivated us to continue to grow that part of us as Indigenous people. And not only us, but like our parents as well. Like I think about my own mom. She's an Indigenous woman, and she's only really started picking up the culture probably maybe 20 years ago. And that's kind of like an example, really another piece of that example of like where we're at with the culture and taking care of our babies, our toddlers. So this next piece is another kind of more work side. I've got a video coming up, and it's more of the work that I have been involved in recently with infant and early mental health promotion. So I've been working with Chaya Kulkarni, Leslie Watts, their crew on putting together a project called Natural Helpers for the Children. And we produced like it's an 8-part learning series, and it's really inviting anyone and everyone in the community we invite, and like a lot of like mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts, community members, grandparents, Jabans, or great grandparents. We invite them all to participate in this 8-part learning series, and it's really about aligning the science of Western knowledge with Indigenous knowledge. So we kind of see hand in hand of like how that aligns up. So this is it's a little promo video of it. I just want to share it and maybe speak a bit more about what we do in our work to not only include not only to teach like around infant and early mental health, but how we include like everybody as a whole and not just kind of certain groups. So I'll start the video here. It should start right away. Hey,
hey, away, hey, oh, hi, away, hey, away, hey, oh, hi, oh, hey, hey, away, oh, hey, away, oh, hey, away, hey, oh, hi, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh. Hey, away, hey, away, hey, oh, hi, away, hey, away, hey, oh, hi, oh, hey, hey, away, oh, hey, away, oh, hey, away, hey, oh, hi, oh, hey, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh. Little one.
I think it changes as time goes on. I think as my kids age, it changes. When they're younger, I want them to be kind, but then as they grow older, I want them to be still kind and still, contributing members of the community, but also to look for opportunities to kind of serve others, to give back.
Something that I've learned from my children is that they are the dreamer, not so much what is my dream for them, but honoring that dream that they have, and fostering it and nurturing it.
I think my hope is that I'm raising them to be confident and to have strong roots in love and kindness.
I think that with all these programs and supports that we have in place right now is going to help our children flourish, like it's such a big difference from where we were 5 years ago to where we are now. Just to keep them on that road, that they have support wherever they are.
For every generation, I hope that it gets a little bit better and we break, that cycle of abuse and trauma that our people have faced. For a lot of us, it's hard to be confident in yourself, when it's been told to us for so long that we're almost inferior, our culture was almost taken from us completely, and it's just starting to rebuild again.
I would like to see that we continue our Cree identity with regards to the language, because once you lose your language, you're going to go into that melting pot and you're just going to be like anybody else in this continent, really.
For our kids, I just want them to be able to have that confidence in themselves, in that culture, that history, that language, everything, just to be empowered. And
that's one of the hopes and dreams I have for this community, and to know that we're still here. So that's one of my dreams is for this to happen in this community, to reconcile and to move forward and to push our identity and hold on to our identity as Cree people.
So that one was a part of the natural helpers for the children learning circle. And just to share a bit about some of the things that we had going on here. That program, as I mentioned earlier, was developed as an early mental health promotion, and we did a lot of really a lengthy amount of groundwork. And it was actually during the pandemic, so we had a lot of at distance work. And I think as time went on, we were able to connect in person and jump on it. And we had put together a solid 8-series session, and we've had since its beginning, we've had 3 or 4 rounds of natural helpers, and each round we get tons of solid feedback. So it's really about looking at why is it important for us to really care and pay attention to what we do and how we interact with our babies. How much the connection, especially at the beginning, is so important. And the crew from the China crew, they bring the science behind it. They talk about the brain activity around it. And they talk about the ways that babies also interact. And then the Indigenous knowledge just absolutely complements all of that and shows that we have been doing the things that, you know, they're starting to elicit in research, that we have been doing it for generations. And we also talk about how the residential school system, the 60 scoop, the millennial scoop, how all of that's impacted our parenting and like where we're at now. And that we're trying to regain a lot of the old ways of living, learning, and being, and like with our families. In the logo, you see, like we always remained the importance of fathers being involved, and in the logo we have the father there. Like in other logos and other kind of things like themes, you see like the baby, of course, front and center. But we really wanted that circle and that kind of caring connection. So we see the father, we see the mother, and then in the background we see the gukum here, the granny. And that's kind of showing that there's support around this unit to really bring them forward. And we also wanted to bring the medicines. So the medicines here, you see the blueberries, we do see that as healing, as medicines, and we really wanted to bring that as well forward as well in this program. So those are different kind of small examples, small snippets, pieces of information about that program and how we did it. And I think, of course, at the end of this, like if you're interested in learning more about that, we have a specific presentation on that. So I can share more about that. From that work, we actually moved and jumped on board with the program called Nurturing the Seed. And that's using the ASQ screeners, the developmental support plans, DSPs. We jumped on board with that, and Chaya worked with us really well. I'm guessing Chaya and crew, they probably provided some formal training to this group or folks from this group. Maybe that was one of them, or maybe it was a version of it, but we've really started to pick up with that in our community Moose Factory here. And, you know, we're trying to work with other First Nations in our region to make it happen. But so far, Moose Factory is really picking up on it, and it's been valuable. What I've learned through these two programs, and actually the Prevention House, which I'll speak to in a bit, is that when they're babies, when they're young, they're toddlers, we often see both parents come more often than we see, say, if we're working with programs that are older than like 6 years old, like more into the teens, and we see them more involved. And we see that as an opportunity to really bring them in to continue working with them, to continue having them engaged in their toddlers and their babies' lives. And hopefully that sets the stage for further connection between fathers and their babies with the family unit, of course. So that's one observation that we have. So up here, I have the Prevention House, and that's really been one of the major reasons I'm here as a manager. So the Prevention House essentially is a program meant to work with families who are involved with child welfare services or who had become involved in child welfare services. And we set up an entire system creating one-to-one services and community programming for both Moosonee, which is a neighboring community here, and then Moose Factory as well. And we really put together, I think, a solid, just different activities for working with fathers. I could definitely share that we've had made a bunch of efforts along the way. And of course, it's like, maybe like many of you, there can be a struggle working with fathers. I absolutely want to acknowledge that. It can be a struggle working with fathers. There's so many reasons for that. And I'll talk, I think, a bit about that in my later presentation. But for the Prevention House, the efforts that we've made are, and where we found a bit of success, or not a bit, we found success in, is like when we invite them out to dad-specific programs, land-based programs, and I'll share a bit more about that in my presentation a little later. We've opened up our language and the way that we've kind of rolled out our forms and our way that we interact, the way that we opened up to father-specific family situations. So if we have single dads, if we have single, or, you know, the dads, there's a split, we will then, if there's a split and then dad still wanting to be involved in services, we'll start up services with dad, continue services with mom. So we have like different ways that we approach it that remain responsive to the family situation, the father situation. And we've seen fathers really appreciate that kind of support. It's kind of starting where they're coming from. So that's one example that I could share, or a couple of examples I could share of our work at the Prevention House, Nurturing the Seed and Natural Helpers. So kind of going into a bit more of a general presentation or a general father presentation, I'll kind of throw in some Indigenous experiences in there as well. But I wanted to touch on a few things. So like one of the things that I've researched and seen in the experience, like in my work in my career and working with like the Prevention House and these different initiatives that we got, is that like I wanted to kind of discuss what are the influences of fathers. So I can share that mothers are absolutely an influence on how much a father will be welcomed and supported. The more support that we see for fathers coming on board, then the more that we see them come on board. Like it's almost like a like a stoplight. Like if they see the green light, they're gonna kind of come forward. We've seen that. So absolutely, if a mother, like if the mother's supportive and encouraging, I think dad will come on board. I've seen that. Now the way a person is raised is absolutely influences their own ways of raising their children. So their own father is another influencing factor when we're thinking about fathers today. Like how was their relationship with their dad? How was it supportive? Was it nurturing? Was it distant? Like those kinds of different things. Those are also important factors. And in relation to the Indigenous people's experience, like residential school, I think is a big component to how many fathers, many Indigenous fathers are today, and how their connection is between them and their kid and their family. Residential schools, the millennial scoop, the 60 scoop, all of those play roles in like what's happening when we come across our families. And it wasn't too long ago. Like always remind people that like this history wasn't too long ago. Like my father, he is a survival residential school. I have a grandfather who is a survival residential school. It's like it's a couple of generations away. I'll say that. And we see that in the communities and the people that we work with. We see what their abilities are when it comes to connecting and raising their children. Now, I mean, in my case, I had the opportunity where my own dad, he attended residential school, and I could see different like things, different aspects of the residential school life is and how he is now. But I also see that he worked a lot on himself. And I know he worked a lot on himself when he was a younger man, probably when I was a baby. But he did that for himself and for his family. And the same thing with my grandfather. He did that for himself and his family, and you could see it in my mom, where she's at now. Like you could see that there was like all of this possibility could have happened where he wasn't well, she wasn't well, that could have produced a situation where I wasn't well. And we think about like the science. I know Tim mentioned earlier that the closer connection and the closer like how much a father nurtures their baby will mean how well that baby does. Think about the science there, and you think about what happened with residential school, and you could kind of connect the dots, and you see, yeah, maybe that's why fathers or Indigenous people are struggling, or some of them are struggling in life. So, I mean, thankfully, I've been set up with a pretty decent start, I'll say, for my own father, my own grandfather, like where they're at and where I'm at now. I could definitely like I'm very thankful for that, quite honestly. And it's I mean, it just places me in an opportunity in a good space to really learn and reconnect with old ways of raising babies. And this project has been amazing to me, like learning the old ways and aligning it with science, because I've been kind of in two worlds where I'm in the Western science. I'm university educated. I have all of this in me, and then at the same time, I'm reconnecting with that history, that traditional knowledge. So these are kind of opportunities for me to be there. And it's not always like that. And we see parents, we see fathers, we see mothers struggle, and you wonder why sometimes. And when you really do a deeper dive into it, that there are so many reasons why. And yeah, I kind of wanted to bring that. So I think about the support, that my mom had in her healing, and that my dad had in his healing. And then for me, I was coming from that space. And then I also dove into social work. So when you go into social work and you're helping people, you learn a whole lot about things and people, and how people are, how people grow, how people interact with one another. You learn, you pick up different tricks and tools that you probably use in your own life. And I think that's what happened to me as well. That places me, I think, in a better space to raise my own daughter. And yeah, like I'm hoping to do well. And in our video, we see mother, she says, I hope that every generation does a little better. So essentially, that's another way to say that. So that, like the level of support fathers have definitely plays a role in how well they'll do in connecting with their father, or their children. Sorry, how well they'll connect with their children, and then in turn that kind of like will shape how that toddler, that baby is as they grow older. Now, these 3 points, I need to say that this is not an exhaustive list by any means. So things like gender absolutely influences how fathers are, how well they do, how they're influenced. I think about the folks who come from that LGBTQ2S plus. They're underrepresented in all of like in support that they get for their lives, and then in parenthood. The parenting programs that we see, they're generally not geared towards folks who are in that or who live that. Another big one is socioeconomic status. Like, where are they at in terms of like their level of income, their standing, their social standing, their economic standing? Like, how are they doing? If they're struggling, that's going to influence how well a father does in raising his baby. And then things like, the skills that they bring, like, do they have children from, is this their second or third child, like that? And then that'll kind of show how much they have with skills, with confidence, and those absolutely play a role. Now, I wanted to kind of bring these things up, as well as what I just mentioned, as just various, to get you thinking about, like, there are various factors that play a role into how a father is a father to their child. So I absolutely wanted to bring that to the table here. Fathers also come in all shapes and sizes. Now actually in history and culture, the Indigenous culture in the past, it was a community setup where many members of the group took care of the babies. They had different tasks to take care of the babies, and it was varying. It was like there's each, and I know each, like I say Indigenous people, but we're people of many backgrounds. I'm a Cree man. I think of like the Haudenosaunee people, the Ojibwe people, even location like the Plains Cree people. Like they all have their own practices, but from what I have learned is that the community really takes care of babies and toddlers. That's how it works. And a lot of that is I see now in people stepping up to take on that father role. Like in many cases, like I work very closely with the child welfare system. Actually, we're a department of a child welfare program, and I work closely with the child protection unit with the prevention house here. And we come across this all the time. Different folks have custody of children. Different or there's a temporary, like we call it a customary care agreement, where kids placed out of the care of their parents, they go onto the uncles or the aunts, and they're in a different setup. So father figures really could mean different things, of course, like fathers, grandfathers. I know for a while, like my parents had taken care of their great grandchild. We see uncles, stepdads, we see adoptive dads, and each of those people come and bring different aspects to fatherhood and how they interact with their babies. And then the family structure is also important, considering when supporting fathers. So it could be like the traditional kind of family structure, mom, dad, kid, or kids. Or we could have single fathers, we could have stepfathers. It could be brand new fathers, young fathers, not young fathers. I say not young, and I didn't say old, because I felt like I felt a little something when I said old. So not young fathers. And then each of that kind of brings its own story, right? And I think about that actually, the not young fathers piece. So I was in like my mid 30s when I had Anea. And by that point, I think I really feel I had so much of my stuff together. Like I felt like in a good space. And I could imagine if I had a kid at early 20s, I really wonder what that would have been like. Like I would put in effort for sure, but I was in a different space back then and compared to now. So that even that kind of brings its own story, right? And then of course the gay, the bi, the queer, the transgender fathers, every one of these fathers, these types of people, they bring their own story, they bring their own background, and those are considerations that we need to have when working with fathers. And of course, culture plays an important role for fathers. Now, like in my experience working with Indigenous fathers, there is a lot of influence from the Western culture. It's a reality that we're in, but many are coming back to the old ways of being. I feel like there are the more there are opportunities for this learning, this old ways of learning, the more we'll see fathers take up to that, like to those traditional values, to those kinds of relationships held from that Indigenous perspective. And it's a reconnect. And then once dads are ready, they jump into it. And I've seen that. I've seen that with other fathers who have been a bit lost and are a bit struggling. Think about my work in, as a counseling, a community counselor, and a lot of that is feeds into what I'm sharing today, is that I've seen that happen once they jumped onto their historic, their beliefs, their traditional beliefs. They really jumped into it, and I think a lot of that informed their values and their approach and how they live with their kids, their family. And then, of course, I share that with my own experience. I think from what I've shared earlier, is that like when the culture is there, there's a strong connect, and I think it becomes important not only for me as a dad, but I could see that and grow that, or see that grow and help my daughter. And hopefully as she grows older, that'll mean something more. So supporting Indigenous fathers, I shared a bit of pieces kind of here and there, so I'll continue to do that. I think and then in my next slide too, but I wanted to highlight here the strength in partnerships. Now I know there's some Indigenous folks here. I'm not sure what your organizations are. If you are in an Indigenous organization or if you're in a non-Indigenous organization, I really see value in even if you are an Indigenous organization, there's so much value in partnering with other organizations, other Indigenous organizations. And then in the case, if you're not working in an Indigenous organization, check out potential partnerships, because we want Indigenous ways coming from Indigenous people to inform those Indigenous practices. And I say that in such kindness and welcoming to do that, because it's just been an experience of mine working with a non-Indigenous partner. We've had proven results with infant and early mental health. I think is just my clearest example. We worked well together, and they really prompted us put us on like a platform, like, no, this, you folks take the lead, you put together this, we'll help you plug into this, this, and this, in terms of like the science of like toddlers and infants. And it was really a relationship that was kind of pushing us upwards and not themselves upwards. Because I've seen that too in my career, where folks would come in, do a bit of research, and then leave, and then there's nothing there. It's kind of the game left with the community, left with the people there. But if you have something where you can create something of meaning and value, particularly working with Indigenous people, I always, like, whenever I get the chance, I'll say, partner with Indigenous folks. If you're going to be working with Indigenous people, partner with Indigenous folks and make something meaningful that will have a lasting impact. And be prepared to stick around. I mean, Chaya, I met her back in 2020. I had my first conversation with her, and I just had a meeting with her yesterday about some other things. So you utilize folks there, because it could mean so many good things for, I think, both non-Indigenous partners and then Indigenous folks and Indigenous organizations. I think it really could mean something well if it's done right. So how can we make a more inclusive space for fathers? So prepare, of course, and provide specific support to services for fathers. I mentioned this earlier, but like the different examples or different things that we did was around like the land-based activities. Like those were, I think, people really like that. And when you come into contact with fathers, get to know their situations, like the background, and support them, like provide that support, like respond to the support needed is what I'm trying to say. Now, I shared earlier that different fathers come from different backgrounds and situations. Tailor your response to supporting families like that. Find out what's going on with them. Have conversations. I've said in previous presentations that if you're clicking with an Indigenous person and you've gotten that trust, you've gotten that rapport, if they start joking around with you and laughing with you, you're in a good space. You're in that good space. So yeah, the Prevention House, we've had dad groups, we've had dad learning spaces. Oh yeah, I wanted to share too, like when it comes to fathers and their involvement, in my experience as a child protection worker, and this was, back in 2012, 2011, whenever a file opened under, like, for a family, it was always under the mother's name. And I always found that weird because sometimes I would be working with single dads and the mom, was doing something else, but the file was still open under mom's name. So if you have systems and structures like that, maybe try to advocate for a change to open up to the father's name. And that's what we did with the Prevention House. Like, we've just kind of opened it up. Again, it's being responsive to the family situations. So in terms of like making things more inclusive, have activities for men. And I mentioned that many Indigenous men do well with land-based activities. So the point of this is that I think in general, there are a lot of people who like being outdoors. They like doing things outdoors. It's nice to be out there. Now, for land-based activities for Indigenous people, it means more than simply being outdoors. It's about connecting and reconnecting that's been with something that's been historically valuable to Indigenous people. It's also like we started with a land acknowledgement, and that's a practice that's really picking up. And I can kind of tie this into that, is that, we've had history, significant amounts of history with the land. And we're always, like, when we're out there, we're reconnecting with the land. And it's just so valuable to us. And, I think about the history too, of like how we've become, or many of our people have become displaced from the land. So that's why that reconnection is important. So that's why land-based activities, or another reason why land-based activities are always talked about when it comes to programming and activities for Indigenous folks. And like along with that, I think the fathers, they really enjoy being out there for that. And then, of course, we can integrate programs, current programs, in other words, current programs into, integrate father-based activities into current programs. So in other words, create programs for both parents and and the families. So the example is like the prevention house, I talked a bit about that. Nurturing the seed, I see both mom and dad come in and do participate in the ASQs and participate in the activities. So they're able to inform that ASQ from both of their perspectives. And then we see them participate in the DSPs and how they can kind of support their baby and their growth and all of that. And I think people really like that in my experience. So that's another way, like it just bring them in, welcome them in, bring like with the invites. Like if you're sitting with mom and you recognize she's been the only one coming in from the beginning, and then you just ask, is dad around? Like, do they want to come in and join? And because we really could use the information and we could help each other. Like it becomes like a conversation, that welcoming in. And then with natural helpers, we did that as well. We invited everybody to come in, not just mom, dad. We invited Gukum, Baba, aunts and uncles, the community members. It's just kind of a more welcoming thing. Another thing is to, well, of course, like go where men are. Where do men feel comfortable? Like where do men want to do activities? I mentioned land-based. We did another thing, a sports event actually, and we had a great turnout, and we were able to share in that time. We were able to share important pieces of information that we want to share about our programs, because we wanted to invite them too. That was an outreach initiative. I think we had a baseball tournament or something like that, and we had like 20, 30 fathers come out. They wanted to play baseball because it was baseball season. And then we were able to connect. And I think out of that, like a few of them ended up reaching out to us eventually. So it's about doing these different ways and making things happen. So have resources ready that can reflect multiple backgrounds. And this is a bit of that preparation, right? Is like, you have resources for maybe Indigenous focused services and supports, that LGBTQ2S plus supports resources for the Black communities, resources for single fathers, for stepfathers, like those kinds of things. So being prepared for something like that, I think would help you in the long run, because it shows that you're putting an effort to respond to their situation. And then another thing is marketing. When you market your programs, especially if it's father-focused programs, I would absolutely recommend to really think about how you put it out there and how you want, like something you want to bring them in, right? So you gotta and that's a part of marketing really, is that you really got to use colors and imagery that represent the father experience or fatherhood experience. Perfect example is I was really looking for a solid template for this presentation. I found this template. It was a bunch of awesome pictures about fathers and their kids. And I really liked it. I hope it kind of helped with this, but like that marketing piece is so important as well to really draw folks in. And I think that pretty well concludes my part of the presentation. I really want to share these different points and just talk about like the different things for consideration. I know it's not going to be exhaustive, and I know you folks aren't going to leave as much as I would like to. You're not going to leave here as experts in fatherhood and how to engage, but I just want to get you folks thinking about like how to start, where to start, or maybe you are started and these are other things that you can consider. And to let you know that I'm also open to further conversation here with the Q&A, and then of course I've got my contact that I can pull up shortly. Sure, I'll pull it up now.
Well, thank you, Warren. That was great. So many things to think about as you were going along in your presentation. I was writing notes, and then most of the time you would answer my question within your presentation. So that's always a good sign. did have a question. I was thinking towards the end there around marketing. That's always kind of an important part in terms of just getting the information out there to dads that you have these programs and these are available to dads. Is there a kind of a I hate to use the word best practices, but some kind of guidelines around hitting some of the marks around I was wondering if you could unpack that a little bit more around elements that you feel like dads are really responsive to in terms of like that engaging piece. And
Yeah, no, it really, like, for me, when it comes to marketing, I always rely on like what I'm trying to do. Like if it's a land-based activity, then I'm gonna have pictures of things that are happening on the land. I'm gonna use colors, kind of natural, like greens, browns, things like that, color, blues if we're doing something on the water. And then like big bold colors. I absolutely like to keep, whenever I do a poster in general, I like to keep it simple as possible, and then a way to contact. So there's not too much. I don't have like a step-by-step thing for you, but I just kind of general information is be responsive to what you're trying to do always. Some folks in some organizations, I think they probably rely a bit too much on maybe their own standard template. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they have to, but there could be a case on like, well, if I'm trying to do this color scheme and this fonts, they're not exactly going to work the way that I want them to, right? And then make an effort to try to make a case to, or try to make a case to, like, this is what I want to do instead. And for me, I've always been supportive of staff in kind of running with their own ideas. They pick my brain, like just being a father and being a guy here in the community. Like, what do you think about this? Is this kind of change this or this? Like, it's really about being responsive to what you're trying to do, what event you're trying to put on, or what you're trying to share. I mean, I don't think there's too much else I could say to that.
no, that's great, and that kind of leads me into my other question around do you find there's how do you navigate the balance between we're going to run a program for young dads and specific groups versus like we're going to run programs for all dads, and are there kind of some things that you use to kind of identify what's the better way to go to kind of reach those groups?
Well, for us, and at the prevention house specifically, like we look at the trends that we're coming into with the one-to-one clients that we have, and maybe some of the things and some of the requests that we see in the community. For the most part, I think a lot of our like the young dads, for example, like we do put it out there. That's more of like an everybody come in, and then we'll make specific invites when we do have discussions with parents. Like, well, does the other parent want to come in? I think it'll be good for them to come in, and then kind of bring them in that way. So it can become like an individual type of support. If we're doing something for like the younger dads, we will like identify it on the poster, but I think in terms of turnout and numbers, we rely heavily on like what is happening in the one-to-one work and trends the trends that we're seeing. So yeah, I'm just trying to think of an example of where that has come up, because for the most part we've been running like all dads kind of activities, all dads events, and then seeing who comes up from there. Another important part to that is consistency. In terms of community programming, if you have a consistent community program and people see that you're consistent, then they're going to come out more. More people are going to show up. That's been my experience at least. And then yeah, with the dads, I think we do try to do that as well. Have a consistent where they know to anticipate. Okay, prevention house is going to be doing this, and we put it out there, and sure enough, folks show up.
Very good. Any other questions from the audience? Feel free to kind of, put your questions in the chat, or, you can also come off mute and ask your questions. I know I kind of just jumped in there because I was so excited about the presentation myself, but it doesn't need to be about me. So feel free to kind of, again, if you have questions, I can keep an eye on the chat. If anyone has questions for Warren, that would be great. Yeah, look at a bit of time for that. Anybody has any questions? And as well, Tim, my co-host, you can come off mute as well.
I know other people will have questions. A couple of things popped into my mind. The first one's kind of absurd, Warren, and you'll think, who is this guy? But I learned so much from the animals around me. And in this case, my dog. Because as you said, like on the land and being out in nature. And my dog, as we walk and we'll be in the woods or even just in the city, one thing she always does is just stops and lies down. And she loves just looking around and noticing little insects, birds, people walking by, a tree moving. And it's so simple, but I love it because it's, I love being in the city, but I also love being in the middle of the woods. And I'm as at home in the city as with the chainsaw. But seeing that and being in that moment, which my dog teaches me, is amazing. But I was thinking too, I was wondering because as you look at Indigenous versus non-Indigenous, I'm wondering, and I'll give three thoughts just randomly here, but I'm wondering what ideas, because I always feel like we should be stealing the best ideas. Like, for instance, seven generations. If we as humans, if that's a good idea to look at seven generations down the road and how that would inform how we as people behave, then I think we should steal that idea. So I'm wondering what ideas you think uh, either Indigenous fathers have that could move to mainstream or the other way. And the other thing that's interesting in the chat is there's a bunch of discussion about language, Indigenous language, and being in the government as I am. One of the questions on one of our forums every year is the official languages are English and French. So do you? And I deal almost exclusively with Indigenous uh, peoples. So it's so weird to me. I feel like, and I actually do end up saying, what Indigenous languages do you use? Like Ojibwe or Cree, or because in the government, we see only English and French as the official languages, which I find, it's colonial, but it's kind of insulting. It's kind of antiquated. Anyways, those are my random thoughts, and I'll just let you speak. And again, welcome others to come into the conversation.
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. Like your dog, I think has it right. Is that we do need to pause and really see what's around us sometimes. Like we live in a fast world. And I could tell you that too. Like I don't live in a city. I live in a small town, and I think when people come here, they feel how much the pace is different and between living in the city and living here. Um, so and that I mean I love dogs. I'm a dog person too, so I could totally relate to your story. But I think in that lesson is like that dog's teaching you to slow down, to pay attention to what's around here, and to just take it in and have a moment. And I think that's important. No, I love that. Like I don't think who is this guy? Absolutely not. I value that because I mean it's not an exclusive experience. I don't think, and it's just something that I think we all need to do, just in general, is to pause and reflect on like what we're doing and how we're going about it. The So the ideas, the different ideas and the different ways, like the different knowledge that folks have, and lately I've been thinking about this a lot, and like how does knowledge get passed along? Who determines which piece of knowledge is important, and where does that come from? Because I've taken a number of research courses recently, and like how it really, and those courses kind of taught me like how to be critical of where knowledge comes from and how it's kind of disseminated and how it's shared and what pieces of information get shared. Then I got to thinking like there is a very there's good ideas all around for sure. And I found that a lot of the ideas that Indigenous people bring to the table, like they're already doing things that's Western science is kind of picking up on researching and identifying and saying, okay, yeah, this is probably the best practice, or this is probably the way that we should go. And then you have Indigenous people who have been doing this for generations, and now they're kind of aligning now. So it's like, and for me, like when you said steal, I kind of like felt something, quite honestly, Tim. And I don't think he meant it in a bad way, but I think he meant it more as like, how do we jump on the best idea, and how do we go together with the best ideas? And I really think that's what you meant. But I did want to point it out is that when you use the word steal when it comes to Indigenous ideas, I'm like, oh, you gotta be careful there. But I know what you meant, though, and the way that you were sharing, I could tell that you didn't mean that exactly. But I do really believe that a lot of the Indigenous ideas and the Indigenous ways of living and being can inform other cultures that are not Indigenous. And then I'm sure other cultures that aren't in that kind of Western model or Western science that aren't in there, there's probably so many beautiful and strong ideas that they can bring to the table. It's just really a matter of like, what do we really thinking and reflecting of what do we do? How do we get that information? Is the way that we get that information being critical of like those information pieces, right? Even the scientific and research community, like I know for a fact that a lot of it is Western based, and the values that are brought forward in that is very, very Western based, and they'll identify it as best practices using kind of coming from a certain angle. And I've just become a bit more, what's the word? Critiquing it a little more, I think, those pieces of information. And then at the same time, kind of understanding that, yeah, our culture and the Indigenous ways of being and knowing, like we've had so many things right that were later proven to be right by research and science and things like that. So it's a very, I don't know, it's a pretty big philosophical path to go down to really explore those kinds of things. But I do see like where you're going with it. And yes, I do see that there's so many like ideas and knowledge that we like different cultures hold that can bring to the table, like in terms of like what we should be thinking or how we should be thinking. The 7 generations, from my understanding, is really about thinking and behaving in ways that will kind of impact 7 generations down the road. What will I do now that'll impact 7 generations down the road? Like, what could I do to make things better, hopefully better for that 7th generation? It's really about thinking forward, but also about thinking backwards and thinking about your ancestry, thinking about how you bring forward their knowledge and information, and how could that flow through you as part of that continuum. I do see value in that, and I do see value in thinking and reflecting, and that's really a part of how I've behaved as a father. I'm bringing it back to that. Like, what will I do now that will impact my daughter, which will probably impact her plans for the future going forward, like what she wants to do and how she wants to behave and move forward. So kind of bringing it back to that, I think that's where I'm at with that. Yeah. Norm, I hadn't seen you in years. It's really good to see you. I know this guy. I met him, I can't remember how many years ago. It was before the pandemic. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Warren. I got to visit Warren in Moose Peak Factory. I got to go and teach Indigenous tools for living there with Shirley Turcott. Yes. And Warren's so easygoing. Sometimes maybe that's my question. How do you manage your impatience and frustration sometimes, Warren, when you're bringing forward ideas that are based on 10,000 years of success, of the laws that the people learned from the land? The land gave the people the original laws of everything. And there's been 500 years of concerted effort to wipe it out. And you're doing your best to and in a small community, it's a little easier because the people never left. But then to deal with all the colonized systems that impose themselves on you and have all these assumptions that they're the best and that they have research and they have, in comparative terms, a tiny little amount of track record. In fact, the track record of colonized systems is terrible. Experiment has been a disaster from Indigenous perspective. That colonized systems isolate people, separate people, divide people, whereas Indigenous and uncolonized systems unite people and connect people and attract people. And they're way less traumatic. So when I hear someone saying, well, my dog taught me that maybe some Indigenous practices might have value, then I go straight up and turn left. Because if we do an objective comparison of the way Indigenous systems work successfully and perfectly for 10,000 years and compare them to colonized systems that have been a disaster in this country for 500 years, and not only for Indigenous people, just ask newcomers, just ask immigrants, just ask refugees, just ask the Japanese people, the Chinese people, the Sikh people, the Jewish people, the Doukhobors. Ask them, have these colonized systems worked for you? And let's have an objective conversation comparing the outcomes and the effects, and then choose which ones we're going to use from here on in. But the assumption that the colonized systems are inherently better and more effective is an incorrect assumption. And that is not the basis that I work from, not in Vancouver anyways. But again, that is the frustration and the impatience that Indigenous people have across the country when trying to provide systems that heal and connect and help people on the ground. So there's just a very, very basic disconnect. So yeah, I don't know how you stay so patient. And
well, that's a great question around impatience. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Norman. And just to respond a bit to that, like I think, I mean, I'm a 41 years old guy, and I've had, up to close to 20 years experience. And the more I learn about the systems and structures and the methods of colonization, the more I get to wondering, like, how the heck do we get out of there? How the heck do we get past that? And I think for me, like when I see an opportunity to really talk about that, at least in pieces, and in some cases out directly and have the conversation about it, I'm gonna take it up. And like here today, like there's 19 other people in the room, and they're coming here to listen, and they're coming here to listen about Indigenous ways of like working with Indigenous fathers. And it's an opportunity to share with those 19 people to like some information. And I'm happy that they're here. Like I'm happy that they're wanting to come and learn and have maybe ask a question or two. So whenever I get the opportunity to speak to folks, like non-Indigenous folks about these different kinds of things, I'm always happy to, because I see that as a part of like that continuum, part of that time frame, like 500 years out of and then we think about 10,000 years. Like 500 years is a fraction of that 10,000, and we're still here. We're still resilient. We're still here. So how do we move from here to something that's better and from here? And the impatience, I think we're going to feel. We're really we're really trying in our lives to do our best. And I don't know if we'll see like maybe the what we want to see when it comes to this kind of conversation, because in the grand scheme of things, we're a blip in the universe, and blip in time, but we at least have an audience right now today to hopefully move the needle a little more, right? And I think that's where I'm coming from when it comes to the having these kinds of conversations. And these folks today, like I do appreciate like how much you've listened. I saw some reactions here and there, like of the on-screen reactions, and I totally appreciate that. And that's what we're here to do, and I'm glad you're here with us.
Any other questions from anyone? Okay. Tim, unless you have any other questions,
Well, no, I don't know if anybody else online has any other questions. Like,
I had a quick question, Warren, about the Nurturing the Seed initiative. It's Nurturing the Seed actually started with CAPC CPNP, I don't know how many years ago. And I know that, we also had a little bit of training for a bit, very brief, but it is such a great initiative. And I just wondered how the parents in your community have utilized it. How do they find it? What are you seeing?
Yeah, you know what? It's been described as the missing link by our local health center. Because what we're seeing is, or what they were seeing. So we had that discussion with them. First of all, as a service provider, we wanted to kind of roll this out, and we wanted to meet with them. And it's a few nurses and some health representatives out of that local community health center. So they run the immunization program, and there's a span there. There's a span of like from age of 2 to I think about the age of 4, where these families weren't coming in because they didn't have to come to immunizations. They didn't have any specific program that tied to them being seen. So they described it as the missing link, because then this program meant that they were being seen and more often, and they were being helped by a service provider that could connect them to other resources if needed, right? Because like the DSP program can kind of say, or the DSPs can show where it might be time to get checked by a physician for a particular diagnosis. Maybe there's delays somewhere. And then when we rolled it out, the families are really appreciative of not only being able to talk about their babies. People love talking about their babies, and they're able to come in and share the information. They they're able to get out. Some families, they can't get out, especially when babies are very little, right? So they're able to get out, talk about their babies, and get the support when they need. Everything that I hear about it from the folks that are running it, and in some cases the families that do take it, they really appreciate the support for the different reasons. So it's very well received for the families that do. The retention rate is nearly like 100% for folks who start the process to folks that end. And in the cases that they can't end, it's usually something like they moved or something along those lines. So I mean, it's a solid, like, people who are taking it now are really enjoying it and really appreciating it.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing.
Well, Warren, we thank you for taking the time out today and giving us lots of great information. And on behalf of the coordinating committee and Tim, as well as Tim, my co-host, and Blanca, wish everyone a great day. I've just put into the chat Another possible potential place for resources for supporting all dads is Dad Central, which is a great location for online programming as well as booklets and things like that for dads. And again, Warren, we thank you greatly for your taking the time out today and chatting with us today. So
Yeah,
and to everyone else,
thanks to everyone else for taking the time as well. And Warren, the next time I'm up in Moosonee, I'll get in touch with you and
Yeah.
get in the boat and see you. But thank you so much for taking the time.
No, let's get out on the land. Bring your dog. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Yeah,
And Warren, I
yeah.
hope we keep in touch. The infant and early mental health file, we
Yes.
have that to build on. So it'll be great to keep in touch.
I'm sure I'll see you. I'm sure I'll see you again. Like
For sure.
I'm in the mix now, so I'll probably be out there somewhere. We'll bump into each other.
Sounds good.
thanks
when you
everyone for joining us.
coming out to
Oh, sorry,
Vancouver?
go ahead.
Oh
When you-
yes,
Vancouver.
I'll make it out there again, Norm. Thank you, everybody, and thank you again for the invite. And it was a good chat. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.